Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Harley. I'm your host. Welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Thoughtful Talk YouTube channel. If you haven't yet, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Today, we're talking about how local governments manipulate disaster relief funds. Have you ever wondered where your tax dollars go when disaster strikes? Today we're uncovering a shocking reality where local governments often manipulate disaster relief funds to serve their own interests. In this video, we'll expose the systematic corruption that leaves communities vulnerable, detailing how municipal bodies exploit loopholes and reallocate aid intended for recovery. Now, we've seen a lot of this happening recent, in Minnesota, we've seen it more so in the news nationally now. Now it's getting national attention, which really it's been going on for years. The Department of Human Services in Minnesota has an X account, and they've been calling this out for a long time. However, their thought on the amount of fraud happening in Minnesota was a lot less than what we're now learning. So let's start by looking at how governments divert funds meant for disaster relief. Let's get into this. So here's this is a Forbes article talking about how the Small Business Association potentially lost $200 billion in COVID pandemic relief to fraud and abuse. It says 17%. So let's start at the top. So the Small Business Administration may have lost more than $200 billion to fraud, waste, and abuse during its push to help small businesses during the pandemic through programs like Paycheck Protection Program. A government watchdog report published Tuesday found that the latest astronomical figure of misspending of federal COVID money. During the implementation of programs such as the PPP and Economic Injury Disaster Loans program, guardrails were weakened that would have prevented fraudsters from easily gaining access. The Office of the Inspector General of the SBA said in the report. Now that sounds familiar. Elon Omar was talking about recently that when they developed these programs in Minnesota, that because of COVID, they were developed so quickly that these guardrails just weren't in place. Now, I don't believe that, not for a second. So the report goes on to say, because of the allure of easy money, an overwhelming number of fraudsters were drawn to the program and took advantage of the economic crisis and diverted funding intended for deserving eligible American small business owners, the OIG report said. The report also noted that as of May, OIG oversight has resulted in 1,011 indictments, 803 arrests, and 529 convictions, all related to the COVID-19 PPP and EIDL fraud. Now, this is kind of old news, but I think it ties into everything that's going on. Now we're hearing word that California's got even more fraud than Minnesota. 17%, that's the percentage of the 1.2 trillion doled out by the SBA that may have been lost to fraud, waste, and other abuse, according to the project. SBA spokesperson Han Nguyen blasted the findings, saying in a statement, "We strongly disagree with the OIG's projected fraud total of $200 billion, probably because they know it's more." The SBA said its own analysis estimated $36 billion in its COVID relief funds were lost, of which up to $30 billion has been recouped. Some 86% of the fraudulent payments were sent in the first 9 months of the pandemic, according to the SBA. Before Tuesday's report was released, SBA Inspector General Hannibal Mike Ware had been warning that relaxed internal controls could increase the risk of fraud within the SBA programs. I'm just going to say that with bigger government comes bigger trash. I'm just saying. Bigger government includes more spending, includes more fraud. I mean, just think about that. Let that sink in for a minute. Weak oversight, non-compliance, right? The DHS has reportedly faced audits criticizing its grant management policies and failure to ensure no conflicts of interest existed in taxpayer-funded mental health and addiction programs. You know, we had Care 11 News. Not that I'm aligned with everything they believe, but they did a fantastic segment called Recovery Inc. And they were actually exposing how drug rehabilitation treatment centers were misappropriating their billing. They were paying people's rent for going to their treatment centers and billing, taxpayers for that. Some local governments use federal coronavirus relief fund money for expenses not directly related to the pandemic response, such as General City Hall remodeling, or they even struggled to comply with strict reporting and use requirements. The U.S. Treasury has sought to recoup millions from local government that failed to report how they used the funds. Let me show you this. So, just looking at this. So let's look at. Wait, I think I'm on the wrong one. Okay. So this is a report from the state of Minnesota, Office of the State Auditor. Okay. Granted, this was a long time ago. But I'm just saying, this has been going on for a long time. This isn't just something that started, right? So over the past year, the Office of the State Auditor has seen an increase in problems relating to municipal funds being incorrectly deposited into the affiliated volunteer fire relief associations accounts. This article describes 2 pitfalls and then provides suggestions on how to avoid them. Minnesota law is clear that all money that a relief association receives from a city or town must be deposited into the Relief Association Special Fund. The Special Fund is the Relief Association's restricted pension fund. This requirement ensures that municipal funds given to a relief association are used only for the payment of service pensions and benefits and certain authorized administrative expenses. Most relief associations also maintain a general fund, which is where non-public funds are deposited. A city or town cannot deposit money into the Relief Association General Fund, even if the money was intended to reimburse the general fund for municipal fire department expenses paid by the Relief Association. For example, some relief associations use their general fund to purchase equipment that they donate to the city or town fire department or pay for firefighter training. In a relief association, if a relief association chooses to use this general fund to cover expenses that would normally be the city's or town's obligation, the relief association cannot be reimbursed for those expenses. However, the city or town can pay the expenses directly, right? All assets intended for use by a municipal fire department must be controlled by the city or town. Donations made to the fire department are donations to the city or town. Further information about fundraisers or donations is provided in a statement of position entitled Fundraiser or Donations for Fire Departments, Fire Relief Associations on the OSA's website. Just to give you some insight. just to give you some insight on how that's supposed to go. So then in July of 2025, the Daily Record wrote, U.S. wants back millions in COVID relief from local governments over missing reports. The U.S. Treasury is seeking to recoup COVID-19 pandemic relief funds from hundreds of local governments that received millions of dollars but never complied with requirements to report how they used the money. Where's it going? That's the big question. Where is it going? The federal government distributed $350 billion to state, local, territorial, and tribal governments as part of their American Rescue Plan approved by Congress and President Joe Biden in 21. More than 30,000 governments from the largest state to the tiniest town were to get a share. Governments had until the end of 2024 to obligate the money for specific projects and were supposed to file either quarterly or annual progress reports depending on their population and how much money they received. Most complied, but as of January, about 1,000, mostly smaller governments, had failed to file any reports with the Treasury detailing how they used the total of $139 million. According to an analysis by the U.S. Government Accountability Office, the GAO report released last week said the Treasury sent notices to the local governments seeking to recoup the money. As of June 24th, a total of 740 local governments subsequently filed reports and will no longer be subject to repaying their funds. Yeah, because once you go in there and you tell them we're going to take the money back, then of course they're going to do what they're supposed to be doing in the first place. Why not? The Treasury said in a letter attached to the GAO report, 13 governments returned their funds to the Treasury. But that still left 235 local governments that had never filed a report nor returned their pandemic relief funds. The GAO told the Associated Press it does not have a list of the specific governments that had complied with the reporting requirements. The Treasury has not responded to an AP request for a list of the 13 governments that returned their funds and those that still haven't reported how they used it. Of course, it goes on to say, this is not the first time concerns have been raised about governments failing to disclose how they used their pandemic relief funds. The GAO reported in October 23 that the Treasury had sent non-compliance notices to more than 3,500 local governments that hadn't filed progress reports, on their pandemic relief funds. The Treasury at that time declined to provide the non-compliance letters to the AP. So the AP in January 24 submitted a Freedom of Information Act request seeking copies of the non-compliance notices and related correspondence. The Treasury still has not fulfilled that request at the time of this article. In its most recent report, the GAO said the failure of local governments to file regular progress reports is limiting the Treasury's ability to determine whether they are spending the funds on allowable uses. And that's where we go back to weak oversight and non-compliance. See, the thing is in a 2016, that report from 2016 from the Minnesota State Auditor's Office highlighted the potential pitfalls where municipal funds intended for restricted pension funds were inappropriately mixed with general funds. Weak oversight and non-compliance. That's the left. So concerns have been raised in specific local instances and potential bidding schemes and conflicts of interest designed to bypass public notifications and competitive bidding processes for public works projects, which can lead to fraud and higher costs for taxpayers. And we covered that in that article. So as we analyze these reports, it's clear that the data speaks for itself. I like a quote from Thomas Paine saying, "A body of men holding themselves accountable to nobody ought not to be trusted by anybody." So what's the real cost of the bureaucratic failure? It's not just numbers on a spreadsheet. It's the lives that are affected. I know that this is a little on the older side as well, but everybody's hiding their skeletons. A gloves-off conversation on aid diversion and double standards. So fraud happens, funds are diverted, scandals are unearthed, but how these issues are handled varies widely across the aid sector. Humanitarian groups must be more open about the reality of fraud and mismanagement, or risk worsening the fallout. Aid leaders said during a recent panel discussion, and this article's old. I'm not going to lie to you, October 3rd, 2023, but obviously these are like things that, have been going on for a long time, and that's kind of what I'm stressing here, right? Anybody who wants to say that this fraud in local government, state by state, is like a new thing, is not. An enormous amount of aid money goes missing and we don't report on it. And we're not transparent about it, said Rory Stewart. Until recently, the president of the NGO Give Directly and a former cabinet minister in the UK government. This year, Give Directly went public after discovering staff had stolen $900,000 in cash aid intended for people in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. See, and that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? With these NGOs, and these NGOs, they go to your local government, right? And they say, "Hey, look here, I'm a social justice warrior. There's a battle to be fought out there, right? These kids are hungry. People need places to live. People need places to live." Anybody who knows homeless people, right? I don't like know homeless people, like personally, right? However, I've sat down and had a conversation with a lot of the homeless people in my local area, or some. I can't say all of them, right? Okay, that didn't happen. Let me backtrack. So I've done a lot of ministry, and I've talked to a lot of people. Anytime I sit down with a homeless person, they're like fine with it. They're okay with it. They're okay with being homeless. And I don't get it. They don't want to follow the rules, whatever it is, right? So to start this thing, right? Like housing stabilization, right? So in Minneapolis, 8 defendants have been federally charged with wire fraud for their roles in a massive housing stabilization fraud scheme. See, these NGOs, they go to your local government and say, "Hey, I got this thing. You know what I mean? Give me some money and we'll help take care of it," right? As set forth in the charging documents, the defendants devised and carried out schemes to defraud federally funded healthcare benefits collected within Minnesota's Housing Stability Services Program. Right? And HSS has been like one of the big things. Feeding our future, you know what I mean? Giving money to these nonprofits to, do the bidding of local government to, and adapt as social justice warriors to systems of social justice to go out and fight these problems that, I get it. Some people need help, but like the people aren't getting help. And when we expand the government to make it bigger than it needs to be, right? Fraud increases, spending increases. I mean, think about it. Before the program's inaugural year, the program was predicted to cost about $2.6 million annually. That proved to be inaccurate. In 2021 alone, the program paid out more than $21 million in claims. That figure ballooned in the following years: $42 million in 2022, $74 million in 2023, $104 million in 2024, in just the first 6 months of 2025. The program paid out another $61 million. Listen. Of course. Of course. Of course that would happen. You know, just bottom line, like, can I go over this one? Yeah, that's where we're at. Okay. Now, Care 11 News, I know I talked about this before, but they've done a really wonderful job at really outlining what all this looks like. Let's watch.
Welcome to Breaking the News Plus. On this Thursday night, we are going to talk to our investigative producer because there has been a ton of activity and the latest batch of fraud that they brought up in May with what's called the Housing Stabilization Services that was newly implemented in Minnesota. Kelly Dietz, our producer with our investigation team, is here again. Hey, Kelly, thanks for being here.
Back again. How are you, Jana?
I'm trying to get through all the work you have done this week. So, in May, you do the story of fraud in housing stabilization services. Let's quick recap what that is.
Where are we now? So Housing Stabilization Services is a Medicaid-funded program. It's run through DHS. They are the state oversight agency for the program. And essentially, it's a program supposed to help people find and maintain housing. So think counselors are assigned with you to help do things like put your name in an electric bill and start looking for different apartments that are within your budget. They're helpers, and they're assigned to you, especially for people with Medicaid, people who are disabled, people who are elderly, to help them get that.
And so we have this program. It's supposed to, on paper, do good.
Yep.
That's the intention.
And that's just the thing. Just because it's intended to do that doesn't mean that that's what it's going to do. You know, I can say something to somebody with the intent of being uplifting, but not be. You know, I can do something with the intent of helping somebody and it not be helpful. And that's just the bottom line. And that's what people need to understand is that just because we intend for something to have some sort of a positive effect doesn't mean that it's going to be.
But fraudsters come in.
Yeah. So what we've learned today, according to acting U.S. Attorney Joe Thompson, is that from what he's seen, there's more fraud than there is legitimate money going out.
Yeah.
Total.
Exactly.
$100 million program as of this year. I believe the latest number is 107 million. And his statement today was that from what he has seen, there is more fraud in that pot than there is real money.
And remind our viewers tonight how our investigative team, you get involved with looking into HSS. It comes from the viewer, right? They reach out to you.
So it came from the viewer. For a long time, our investigative team, even predating my involvement with this investigative team, has been doing like a lot of investigation in the peer recovery space and certain individuals.
And I touched on that too, because like there's been this like influx of peer recovery specialists, right, in the recovery realm. You know, I know about Minnesota because that's where I'm from, but like, you know, in Minnesota, there's been this influx of recovering addicts going out and getting licensed as peer recovery specialists, and then they get to go and get a job at a treatment center or even start a business, you know, providing peer recovery support services for people who are in long-term recovery. And what was found to be true was that they were billing, you know, Medicaid, their clients' Medicaid, twice as much as the time that they were, you know, spending with these people. And, you know, really the victims in this are the people who, you know, not just the taxpayer, but the people there that are actually seeking help. not getting the help. You see that, and you've seen that in the housing stabilization services. There's been tons of videos out there on the interweb that have shown people who have, signed up for, HSS support, housing stabilization services support, and their, medical insurance is getting billed for things that they're just not even receiving.
Got hold of their billing record, and as we were looking into some of the billing records on that end, there were these line items for companies that people knew little to nothing about.
Yep.
And one of them was an HSS company. And the more we started to dig, the more we found out that these services that were being billed were not being provided. And then client after client just started to come forward once we aired our first report
Yep.
Of services not being provided as billed. And it spiraled from there.
And that kind of behind the scenes stuff is important for our viewers to understand. It's like one accusation of wrongdoing or one viewer saying, I don't know what this means. When you guys look at the paperwork, you see other things.
Right.
So it's like an investigation starts another investigation.
100%.
Yep.
And that's exactly what happened here.
And that's why I wanted to start you off at the beginning, right? And it is beyond the headlines right now. Right now, all the national attention is happening, and it should have a lot sooner, because this stuff has been going on for a long time, and that's the premise behind what I'm trying to show you, right? It's not new news, right? That I'm trying to disseminate here. It's just that local governments have manipulated disaster relief funds and these kinds of funds for a long time. Bigger government, more spending, more fraud. It's pretty simple.
We were going down one road and something came up that just didn't seem right, and
Right.
answers weren't there. So we just kept digging. And the more we kept digging,
Show your daughter how much you love her with this beautiful gift.
The more they kept digging, the more that they found.
It says,
And that's the point. That's the point. And that's my biggest point to you. 100%. Obviously, you have the stuff that was coming out from the EIDL and PPP loan fraud landscape. That was, that's not new news either. None of this is new. And as we, look into this stuff, the manipulation of disaster relief funds is a pressing issue that demands our attention. And in essence, what do we get with the bigger government, bigger spending? It comes with bigger fraud. And as citizens, we must hold our local governments accountable to ensure that disaster funds are used for their intended purpose. Cut and dry. If you found this video informative, please like, share, and subscribe for more investigative content. Have a blessed day.